The Zephyrian Council chamber had never witnessed such desperation. High Chancellor Vex High stood before the assembled representatives of 12 different species, her usually pristine blue-scaled hands trembling as she clutched the emergency communique. The holographic display behind her showed the devastating reality they all faced, entire star systems going dark, one after another, as the Devourers continued their relentless advance across the galaxy. "Esteemed colleagues," she began, her voice carrying the weight of billions of lives, "we have exhausted every conventional option. Our combined fleets have been decimated. The Korthak battle cruisers, pride of their military, lasted mere hours against a single Devourer ship. The Altarian defense grids, considered impenetrable, were torn apart like paper." Murmurs of fear and anxiety rippled through the chamber. The Devourers were unlike anything the galaxy had ever encountered. They weren't just conquerors or even destroyers. They consumed entire worlds, literally devouring planets, stars, and everything in between to fuel their incomprehensible technology. No one knew where they came from or what drove them, only that they left nothing but empty space in their wake. Ambassador Theclon of the Veilthra stood up, his crystalline form refracting the chamber's light into rainbow patterns. "Chancellor, surely there must be something we haven't tried. What about the ancient weapons caches on Zirian Prime? The temporal displacement technology of the Chronarch?" Vexai's expression grew even more grim. "Zirian Prime was consumed 3 days ago. The Chronarch homeworld fell yesterday. Their temporal shields meant nothing to the Devourers." She paused, gathering herself before continuing. "There is, however, one possibility we haven't explored." The chamber fell silent. Every eye, optical sensor, and perception organ focused on the Chancellor. The humans. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Dozens of species began speaking at once, their words creating a cacophony of doubt and derision. The humans were a young species, barely having achieved faster-than-light travel a few centuries ago. They occupied a small cluster of systems on the outer rim of the galaxy, far from the centers of galactic civilization. Most species barely acknowledged their existence. "Chancellor, with respect," interrupted General Zyextar of the Hegemony, "the humans possess no technology that could challenge the Devourers. Their ships are primitive, their weapons crude by our standards. What could they possibly offer that our combined might could not achieve?" Vexhai activated another holographic display. This one showed scattered reports and data files, many marked with warnings about their disturbing content. 3 months ago, our research division completed a comprehensive analysis of human military capabilities. The findings were unexpected. The first file showed footage from the human colony world of Kepler 442b. A massive insectoid species called the Ravagers had invaded the planet, overwhelming the colonial defense forces. The footage showed human civilians, men, women, even children, taking up arms and fighting with a ferocity that shocked the analysts. They didn't retreat when faced with superior numbers or technology. Instead, they adapted, improvised, and fought harder. "The humans have a saying," Vexhai continued. "When the going gets tough, the tough get going." They seem to view impossible odds not as reasons for surrender, but as challenges to overcome. The second file detailed the human response to a plague that had devastated several of their worlds. Instead of quarantining the affected areas and writing them off as lost, human scientists worked around the clock, often sacrificing their own lives to develop a cure. They succeeded where other species' computer models had predicted certain extinction. But what caught our researchers' attention most, the Chancellor said, was this. The final file showed military footage from a human training exercise. Marines were being put through scenarios that other species would consider torture, fighting in environments that would kill most galactic citizens, operating on minimal sleep and resources, facing overwhelming odds with equipment that was generations behind galactic standard. What shocked the observers wasn't just that the humans endured these trials, but that they seemed to thrive on them. "Their military doctrine is unlike anything in our databases," Vexhai explained. "Most civilized species wage war through overwhelming technological superiority, maintaining distance, and minimizing casualties. Humans wage war through what they call control violence. They close to hand-to-hand combat ranges when necessary. They fight on after being wounded in ways that would disable other species. They never seem to know when they're beaten." Ambassador Theclon's crystalline form flickered with uncertainty. Even so, Chancellor, their technology remains inferior. What good are savage tactics against the Devourer's reality-warping capabilities? That's exactly what I intend to find out, Vexai replied. I'm proposing we make contact with the human government and request their assistance. The chamber erupted again. The proud hegemony delegates were particularly vocal in their opposition. They had ruled the galaxy for millennia and found the idea of seeking help from primitive humans deeply offensive. The Vaelthera, with their advanced psychic abilities, dismissed humans as mentally inferior. Even the peaceful Altarians questioned whether involving such a violent species was wise. But as the debate raged, more reports arrived. Another 3-star systems had gone dark. The Devourers were accelerating their advance, and their next targets included some of the most densely populated worlds in the galaxy. Time was running out. It was General Corvash of the Draconian Empire who finally spoke the words that silenced the chamber. How many of our people have died today while we debate? How many more will die tomorrow if we do nothing? The massive reptilian warrior's scarred face showed grim determination. If the humans offer even the smallest chance of victory, we must take it. The vote was closer than anyone had expected. 7 species voted in favor of contacting humanity, while 5 voted against. But it was enough. Within hours, a quantum communication array was transmitting across the galaxy to Earth. The message was simple and desperate. The galaxy was dying, and they needed humanity's help. The response came faster than anyone anticipated. Within 6 hours, a human transmission reached the council chamber. The voice that spoke was calm, professional, but carried an undertone of something that made several species' survival instincts activate: barely controlled aggression. This is General Sarachun of the Terran Defense Force. We've received your distress call and are analyzing the tactical data you provided. We'll need additional intelligence on enemy capabilities, friendly force dispositions, and strategic objectives. Vexai leaned forward. General Chun, I must stress the urgency of our situation. The Devourers are unlike anything we've faced. They've destroyed civilizations that have existed for millions of years. Do you understand what we're asking of your species? There was a pause before Chen responded. When she did, her voice carried a hint of what humans call dark humor. Chancellor, with respect, we've been preparing for this fight our entire history. Every war we've ever fought has been practiced for the day someone would threaten our existence. The only difference is that this time, we're not just fighting for Earth. The transmission continued. We're dispatching the 3rd Expeditionary Force immediately. They'll be under the command of Colonel Marcus Devilldog Rodriguez. Fair warning, our methods may seem extreme by your standards, but they're effective. We'll need unrestricted tactical autonomy once we arrive. Several delegates began to protest, but Vexai raised her hand for silence. Granted. How long until your forces arrive? 72 hours to the nearest forward base, Chen replied. Colonel Rodriguez will contact you directly upon arrival. And, Chancellor, we've reviewed your tactical reports. Your people fought bravely, but you've been fighting this war like civilized beings. The Devourers aren't civilized. It's time to fight fire with fire. The transmission ended, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. Ambassador Theclon was the first to speak. What have we done? Before anyone could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the station. The massive holographic display updated with new intelligence. The Devourers had accelerated their advance again. They would reach the core worlds in less than a week. As panic began to spread through the chamber, Vexai stood firm. She thought about the human response, the calm confidence in General Chen's voice, and the promise of forces already in transit. For the first time in months, she felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. But even as hope flickered to life, doubt gnawed at her. The humans were sending a single force to face an enemy that had destroyed entire civilizations. Could any species, no matter how fierce, stand against the Devourers? She would have her answer soon enough. In the depths of space, human ships were already moving. The 3rd Expeditionary Force consisted of only 5 vessels, tiny compared to the massive fleets the galactic powers had lost. But aboard those ships were 800 human marines, each one trained from childhood in the art of war, each one carrying weapons and equipment that reflected humanity's unique approach to conflict. They weren't coming to save the galaxy through superior technology or overwhelming numbers. They were coming to do what humans had always done best: to fight when fighting seemed hopeless, to stand when others would fall, and to make their enemies pay in blood for every inch of ground. The Devourers had never faced humanity before. They were about to learn why the rest of the galaxy was both fascinated and terrified by the species from Sol 3, the species that had turned warfare into an art form and survival into a religion. As the human fleet jumped to hyperspace, their battle cry echoed through the communications channels. Semper Fi, Devil Dogs. Time to show the galaxy how Marines die. But Colonel Rodriguez had no intention of dying. He intended to teach the Devourers what it meant to face the fury of humanity unleashed. The human fleet materialized at the edge of the Kalos system like ghosts emerging from the void. 5 ships where the galactic powers had sent hundreds, 800 Marines where others had deployed millions. To the desperate aliens monitoring their approach, it seemed woefully inadequate. Colonel Marcus Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the TDF Normandy, studying the tactical displays with the cold focus that had earned him the nickname Devil Dog among his peers. At 53, he was a veteran of 17 major conflicts across human space, including the Proxima Rebellion and the brutal Asteroid Belt War. His weathered face bore the scars of close-quarters combat, and his augmented left arm was a souvenir from a boarding action against pirates near Alpha Centauri. "Sir, incoming transmission from the alien fleet," reported Lieutenant Commander Sarah Park, his communications officer. "Chancellor Vex High wants to brief you on enemy positions." "Put her through," Rodriguez ordered, never taking his eyes off the tactical display. The Kalos system was a mess of debris and energy signatures from the last major engagement between the Galactic Alliance and the Devourers. Twisted hulks of alien warships drifted between the planets like monuments to failure. The holographic image of the Zephyrian Chancellor materialized on the bridge. Her blue scales seemed to have lost their luster, and her eyes carried the weight of countless defeats. "Colonel Rodriguez, I'm relieved you've arrived so quickly. The situation has deteriorated since our last communication." "How so?" Rodriguez's voice was flat, professional. "The Devourers have established a foothold on Kalos Prime. They're feeding on the planet's core. Our estimates suggest they'll finish consuming it within 48 hours, and then they'll move on to the inner systems." Her voice cracked slightly. 20 billion civilians are trapped on the surface. Our evacuation efforts have been completely overwhelmed. Rodriguez nodded grimly. "What about their fleet strengthened system?" 3 capital ships, approximately 50 escort vessels. Standard Devourer configuration, reality distortion fields, matter conversion beams, adaptive shielding. "Colonel, I must emphasize that these ships have single-handedly destroyed entire battle groups. The largest alien vessel is 3 kilometers long and mounts weapons that can crack moons." "Understood." Rodriguez turned to his tactical officer, Major Janet Harrison. "Janet, what's our assessment?" Harrison, a lean woman with burn scars covering the left side of her face from an orbital drop gone wrong, pulled up the human intelligence analysis. "Sir, based on the data we've gathered, the Devourers rely heavily on their technological superiority. Their ships are tough, but they fight at long range and seem to expect enemies to follow conventional engagement patterns." "Which we won't," Rodriguez stated. "No, sir, we definitely won't." Chancellor Vex High looked confused. "Colonel, forgive me, but how do you intend to engage vessels of that size with only 5 ships? Your largest vessel is barely 300 meters long." Rodriguez smiled, and something in that expression made the Chancellor take an involuntary step backward. "Ma'am, humans have been fighting bigger, stronger, and better armed enemies since we climbed down from the trees. The secret isn't having the biggest guns, it's knowing where to point the ones you have." He gestured to the tactical display. "These Devourers, they consume matter and energy to power their technology, right? That means they're essentially walking fusion reactors. Fusion reactors have a nasty habit of exploding when their containment systems are compromised." The Chancellor's expression grew alarmed. "Colonel, their shields and armor are far too strong for conventional weapons. We've tried everything: antimatter torpedoes, particle cannons, even focused gamma-ray bursts. Nothing penetrates their defenses." "That's because you've been thinking like civilized beings," Rodriguez replied. "Watch and learn." He turned to his crew. "All ships, this is Devil Dog Actual. Execute Operation Broken Arrow. Weapons free, danger close authorized." The human fleet moved with a precision that surprised the watching alien observers. Instead of forming the traditional battle line that most galactic navies favored, the 5 ships scattered into seemingly random vectors. The Normandy and her sister ship Independence headed directly for the largest Devourer vessel, while the other 3 ships, Gettysburg, Guadalcanal, and Iwo Jima, began flanking maneuvers that defied conventional tactical doctrine. Chancellor Rodriguez said, "You might want to fall back to a safe distance. This is going to get messy." As the human ships accelerated toward the Devourer fleet, energy readings began spiking across their hulls. To the alien observers, it looked like the humans were overloading their own systems. Commander Thalnox, the hegemony officer monitoring the human approach, turned to his tactical officer. "Are they having mechanical failures? Their energy signatures are completely erratic." But Rodriguez knew exactly what was happening. The erratic energy signatures weren't malfunctions. They were electronic warfare systems designed by human military intelligence specifically for this mission. While other species had developed sophisticated ECM suites, humans had taken a typically brutal approach. Instead of subtle interference, they were broadcasting massive amounts of electromagnetic noise designed to overwhelm and confuse enemy sensors. The effect was immediate. The Devourer ships, which had been tracking the approaching human fleet with perfect accuracy, suddenly found their targeting systems struggling to maintain locks. Their reality distortion fields, which required precise calculations to function properly, began fluctuating. "First blood to us," muttered Lieutenant Commander Park as she watched the alien ship's formation begin to waver. But the Devourers adapted quickly. The largest ship, designated Target Alpha by the humans, began charging what appeared to be a planet-cracking weapon. Energy readings showed it was preparing to fire a focused beam capable of vaporizing anything smaller than a battlecruiser. "Sir, Target Alpha is powering up their main gun," reported Major Harrison. 30 seconds to firing solution." "Good," Rodriguez said calmly. "Right on schedule." What happened next would be discussed in military academies across the galaxy for decades to come. Instead of trying to avoid the devastating weapon, the Normandy accelerated directly toward Target Alpha. As the massive alien ship fired, Rodriguez ordered an emergency hyperspace jump, not away from the enemy, but directly into the path of their own weapon. The Normandy materialized less than a kilometer from Target Alpha's hull, so close that both ships' shields interfered with each other. The planet killer beam, designed to operate at interstellar ranges, was suddenly trying to focus its energy at point-blank range while dealing with shield interference and electromagnetic jamming. The result was catastrophic for the Devourer ship. The weapon overloaded and exploded, tearing a massive hole in Target Alpha's hull and exposing its internal systems to space. But Rodriguez wasn't finished. "Marines, prepare for boarding action," he barked over the comm system. The idea of boarding a ship that was literally falling apart would have horrified most galactic militaries. The humans saw it as an opportunity. Assault pods launched from the Normandy's belly, each carrying 12 fully armed Marines in powered armor. These weren't the sleek environmental suits that most species use for space operations. They were walking tanks designed for the most hostile environments imaginable. Each Marine carried enough firepower to level a city block, along with equipment specifically designed for fighting in zero-gravity, toxic atmospheres, and irradiated environments. Sergeant First Class Maria Santos led the first wave. A veteran of the Ganymede siege, she had personally held a tunnel complex against an entire pirate battalion for 6 hours before reinforcements arrived. As her pod punched through Target Alpha's weakened hull, she was already planning the assault route. "Okay, Marines," she called over the squad comm as they breached the alien ship's interior. "Remember the briefing. These things feed on energy, so they're basically walking batteries. Find the power core, plant the charges, and get out before the fireworks start." The interior of the Devourer ship was unlike anything in human experience. The walls seemed to pulse with organic energy, and the air was thick with particles that would have been toxic to most species. The Marines' armor filtered it out automatically, while their enhanced vision systems cut through the alien atmosphere. The first contact came within minutes. A Devourer drone, a creature that seemed to be part machine and part living tissue, rounded a corner and found itself face-to-face with 6 human Marines. It raised what appeared to be an energy weapon, began to charge it, and then discovered why humans preferred kinetic weapons. Sergeant Santos's assault rifle fired depleted uranium rounds at 3,000 meters per second. The drone's energy shield, designed to deflect particle beams and plasma bolts, might as well have been tissue paper. The rounds punched through its defenses and tore the creature apart in less than 2 seconds. Contact front, Santos reported. Hostiles down. These things don't handle solid projectiles well. Copy that, Rodriguez replied from the Normandy's bridge. All assault teams, enemy defenses are optimized against energy weapons. Kinetics are proving effective. Meanwhile, the space battle was continuing around them. The Independents had followed the Normandy's example and closed a knife fighting range with another Devourer ship. But instead of boarding, they were employing a different human tactical doctrine, ramming. The Independence was the oldest ship in the human fleet, scheduled for decommissioning after this mission. Her captain, Commander Lisa Chun, had volunteered for what everyone knew was a suicide run. As her ship accelerated toward the enemy vessel's power core, she transmitted a final message. Tell my kids their mom went out swinging. The impact was visible from several light years away. The Independence's reinforced bow, designed to punch through asteroid debris, drove deep into the Devourer's ship's hull before the human vessel's reactor went critical. The explosion consumed both ships, but the aliens watching realized something important. The humans had just demonstrated that they were willing to sacrifice themselves to win. Incredible, whispered Commander Thalnox. They're actually fighting the Devourers to a standstill. But the battle was far from over. The remaining Devourer capital ship was beginning to deploy something the Galactic Alliance had never seen before. Reality anchors designed to prevent hyperspace jumps in the immediate area. The humans were about to lose their mobility advantage. It was then that Colonel Rodriguez revealed why he had earned his nickname. Opening a general communication channel, he addressed the remaining alien ships in the system. All allied vessels, this is Devil Dog Actual. We're about to demonstrate why humans don't believe in no-win scenarios. Follow our lead and prepare to witness the difference between fighting to survive and fighting to win. What happened next would become known as the Kalos Gambit, a maneuver so audacious that it redefined naval combat doctrine across the galaxy. Rodriguez ordered his remaining ships to form up and accelerate directly toward the planet that the Devourers were consuming. As the human ships dove toward Kalos Prime's surface, threading through the massive energy extraction beams that the aliens were using to drain the planet's core, every species monitoring the battle held their breath. It looked like suicide, but Rodriguez had noticed something that the sophisticated alien tactical computers had missed. The Devourer's extraction beams created gravitational distortions, and humans had become very, very good at using gravity as a weapon. The gravitational slingshot maneuver that Rodriguez executed around Kalos Prime defied every principle of conventional space combat. Using the planet's disrupted gravity field and the Devourer's own extraction beams as a boost, the 3 remaining human ships achieved velocities that should have torn them apart. Instead, they emerged from behind the planet, moving at nearly 15% of light speed, fast enough that even the Devourer's advanced targeting systems couldn't track them effectively. But Rodriguez wasn't done with his surprises. As the human ships screamed toward the final Devourer capital ship, he opened a channel to the Marines still fighting inside Target Alpha. Santos, how's the demo prep coming? Sergeant Santos's voice crackled with static as she and her surviving Marines fought their way deeper into the alien ship's bowels. Almost there, sir. This ship's power core is like nothing we've seen before. It's not just fusion. They're literally converting matter directly into energy at the quantum level. The charges we brought might not be enough to breach the containment. Then we improvise, Rodriguez replied. Remember your training, Marine. When in doubt, add more explosives. Santos grinned inside her helmet. The Marines had been carrying more than just conventional charges. Each squad member had a small nuclear device, standard equipment for human boarding parties, designed for exactly this kind of situation. Other species considered it insane to carry nuclear weapons inside a ship, but humans had long ago learned that sometimes you had to be willing to break things completely to achieve victory. Roger that, sir. Going nuclear in 5 minutes. While Santos and her team prepared to turn Target Alpha into an improvised star, the space battle reached its climax. The final Devourer capital ship had realized the threat posed by the approaching human vessels and was bringing all of its weapons to bear. Reality distortion fields began warping space around the alien ship, creating dead zones where the laws of physics no longer operated normally. Lieutenant Commander Park monitored the approach from her station aboard the Gettysburg. "Sir, they're creating some kind of spatial anomaly. Our navigation computers can't plot a course through it." Captain James Morrison, commanding the Gettysburg, was a 20-year veteran who had cut his teeth fighting pirates in the asteroid belt. He studied the distortion field for exactly 3 seconds before making a decision that would have horrified any sane naval officer. Navigation, plot a random walk through the anomaly. Weapons, prepare all missile tubes for spread fire. We're going in blind and shooting everything we've got. "Sir, that's tactically unsound," his tactical officer protested. "We could end up anywhere in the distortion field. We might even end up inside their ship." Morrison's grin was savage. "Son, you say that like it's a bad thing." The Gettysburg plunged into the reality distortion field like a guided missile, followed closely by the Guadalcanal. Both ships immediately lost contact with each other, and with the command ship as space warped around them. But instead of trying to navigate through the anomaly, they did exactly what Morrison had ordered. They fired everything they had in every direction. The result was chaos. Hundreds of nuclear-tipped missiles detonated throughout the distortion field, each explosion creating additional gravitational and electromagnetic disturbances. The Devourer's carefully maintained spatial anomaly began to collapse as the random nuclear detonations disrupted the exotic matter fields that sustained it. When the distortion field finally collapsed, both human ships found themselves exactly where Morrison had hoped they would be, inside the enemy vessel's shield perimeter, so close to the alien ship's hull that their weapons could target specific systems. "All weapons, target their power distribution nodes," Morrison ordered. "Let's see how well they function without electricity." The concentrated fire from both human ships tore through the Devourer vessel's internal systems. But the aliens had one more surprise waiting. As their ship began to lose power, they activated what appeared to be a self-destruct mechanism, but not the kind the humans were expecting. Instead of simply exploding, the Devourer's ship began to consume itself, feeding its own mass into its power core to maintain weapons function even as its systems failed. It was a desperate tactic, but it gave the aliens enough power for one final, devastating attack. "Sir, they're charging some kind of planet-killer weapon," reported the Gettysburg sensor operator. "Power readings are off the scale. If that thing fires, it'll sterilize everything in this star system." It was at that moment that Sergeant Santos delivered the best news Rodriguez had heard all day. "Devil Dog Actual, this is Bravo Squad. We've reached the power core. Setting charges now." "How long do you need?" Rodriguez asked, watching the Devourer's ship's weapon charge on his tactical display. 30 seconds to arm everything. Another 60 to get clear of the blast radius." Rodriguez looked at his tactical display. The enemy weapon would fire in 45 seconds. There wasn't enough time. "Santos, you don't have 90 seconds. "I know, sir." Santos's voice was calm, resigned. "We'll arm the charges and detonate on sight. Someone needs to make sure this thing doesn't get off that shot." The command channel fell silent. Every human in the fleet understood what Santos was saying. She and her Marines were volunteering to die to prevent the Devourers from destroying the star system. It was Rodriguez who broke the silence. "Negative, Marine. I didn't bring you this far to watch you die in a hole. All ships, emergency retrieval protocol. Get those Marines out of there." What followed was the most audacious rescue operation in military history. The Normandy, moving at combat speed, fired maneuvering thrusters to bring herself alongside target Alpha's hull. At the same time, the ship's point defense systems began firing not at enemy targets, but at the alien ship's hull, carving a hole large enough for a small spacecraft to enter. A single Marine drop ship, piloted by Warrant Officer Nakamura, dove through the opening and into the alien vessel's interior. Nakamura had exactly 20 seconds to reach Santos and her team, pick them up, and get clear before the nuclear charges detonated. "Bravo Squad, this is your taxi," Nakamura announced over the comm. "Ground floor, express service to anywhere but here. All aboard." Santos and her 5 surviving Marines sprinted through the alien ship's corridors, carrying their wounded and dodging falling debris as the vessel's structure began to collapse around them. Behind them, the nuclear charges they had planted began their final countdown. They reached the extraction point with exactly 3 seconds to spare. Nakamura's drop ship screamed away from Target Alpha, just as the Marines' nuclear devices detonated deep within the alien vessel's core. The explosion was beyond spectacular. The Devourer ship didn't just explode, it underwent what could only be described as a controlled stellar collapse. The alien vessel's exotic matter containment systems, compromised by the nuclear detonations, released enough energy to briefly create a miniature star in the vacuum of space. The light was visible from 12 light-years away. When the explosion finally faded, Target Alpha was gone. So was this spatial distortion field. And so was the Devourer fleet's planet killer weapon, destroyed before it could fire. But the battle wasn't over yet. The remaining Devourer ships, seeing their flagship destroyed, began to retreat, but not before launching a final, desperate attack on the planet below. Kalos Prime, already wounded by the alien extraction beams, shuddered as dozens of smaller Devourer vessels dove toward its surface. They intended to consume as much of the planet as possible before escaping, denying the victory to the humans even in defeat. Rodriguez watched the enemy ships descend toward the planet, where 20 billion civilians waited helplessly. The human fleet was too damaged to intercept them all. It looked like the Devourers would escape with at least a partial victory. That's when the third phase of Rodriguez's plan went into effect. All ground teams, this is Devil Dog Actual. Execute Operation Hammerfall. High Chancellor Vex High, monitoring the battle from her command ship, looked confused. Colonel, what ground teams? You only brought Marines for ship-to-ship combat. Rodriguez's smile was predatory. Ma'am, with respect, you've been thinking too small. Marines don't just fight in space. The truth was that Rodriguez had been planning for this exact scenario from the moment he received the mission briefing. Hidden aboard the human ships were not just naval Marines, but an entire regiment of orbital drop shock troopers, the legendary ODSTs, also known as Helljumpers. As the Devourer ships descended toward Kalos Prime, 200 individual drop pods launched from the human fleet. Each pod contained a single Marine armed with enough firepower to level a city block, equipped with armor designed to survive atmospheric entry at terminal velocity. The sight of human Marines literally falling out of the sky to engage alien invaders became one of the most famous images in galactic history. The ODSTs hit the planet's surface like meteors, then immediately began engaging the Devourer ground forces with a ferocity that shocked every observer. Staff Sergeant Mike Thompson landed in the middle of what had been the capital city's central plaza. His pod had come down less than 50 meters from a Devourer harvester, a massive machine designed to strip mine entire city blocks and convert the matter into energy. Without hesitation, Thompson activated his armor's jump jets and launched himself directly at the alien machine. Contact front, he called over the squad net as a shoulder-mounted missile launcher engaged target acquisition. Big, ugly harvester, danger close. The harvester was the size of a city building, protected by energy shields that had proven immune to the Planetary Defense Force's weapons. But like everything else the Devourers had built, it was designed to defend against energy weapons, not against a half-ton Marine traveling at 50 meters per second and carrying a tactical nuclear warhead. Thompson's missile punched through the harvester's shields like they weren't there, detonating inside the machine's power core. The explosion could be seen from orbit. All across Kalos Prime, similar scenes played out as human Marines engaged Devourer forces with a tactical doctrine that no one had anticipated. If you can't outthink the enemy or out-tech them, then out-crazy them. The ODSTs fought with a combination of advanced technology and primitive brutality that left the galactic observers speechless. They used gravity hammers to crush alien vehicles, deployed smart weapons that could track targets through 3 dimensions, and when their ammunition ran low, they resorted to hand-to-hand combat with opponents 3 times their size. Sergeant Lisa Park found herself facing a Devourer warrior drone that stood nearly 4 meters tall and carried enough firepower to destroy a tank. Instead of retreating or calling for backup, she did what any sensible Marine would do. She activated her armor's combat stimulants, drew her monomolecular combat knife, and charged. The alien drone died in 17 seconds, torn apart by a human who refused to acknowledge that she was outmatched. Within 6 hours, the surviving Devourer forces on Kalos Prime were in full retreat. The aliens who had consumed entire star systems found themselves being systematically hunted down by Marines who treated impossible odds as a personal challenge. But Even as the Marines celebrated their victory on the planet's surface, Rodriguez was already planning the next phase of the campaign. The Devourers were retreating, but they would be back. And when they returned, they would bring everything they had. 3 weeks after the Battle of Kalos Prime, the galaxy had changed. Reports of the human Marines' impossible victory spread through every star system, carried by refugees, traders, and survivors who had witnessed the impossible. The species that had begged for salvation found themselves studying human tactical doctrine with desperate intensity, trying to understand how a primitive species had achieved what their advanced civilizations could not. But Rodriguez knew the victory was temporary. Intelligence reports from human scouts throughout the galaxy painted a grim picture. The Devourers were regrouping. Worse, they were adapting. The aliens had always been quick to modify their technology based on new threats, and humanity had just taught them that their previous assumptions about galactic warfare were fatally flawed. "Sir, incoming priority transmission from Earth Command," announced Lieutenant Commander Parr from her station aboard the rebuilt command center on Kalos Prime. The human forces had established a forward base in the ruins of the planet's capital, using it as a staging area for operations against the Devourers. Rodriguez accepted the transmission, and the holographic image of General Sarah Chun materialized before him. Her expression was grim. "Marcus, I hope you're ready for the next phase, because things are about to get very complicated. Long-range sensors have detected a massive Devourer fleet assembling at the edge of the galaxy. We're talking about thousands of ships, including vessels we've never seen before. How long do we have?" Rodriguez asked. 6 weeks, maybe 7. But that's not the worst part. Chen's expression grew, even more serious. "They're not just bringing more ships. Intelligence indicates they've been studying the wreckage from Kalos Prime, analyzing human technology and tactics. They know how we fight now, and they're preparing countermeasures." Rodriguez nodded grimly. He had expected this. The Devourers weren't stupid. They were just arrogant. The first battle had taught them that arrogance was a luxury they couldn't afford when fighting humans. "What about reinforcements from Earth?" he asked. "The entire Terran Defense Force is mobilizing, but it'll take months to get significant numbers to your position. You're going to have to hold with what you've got, plus whatever allies you can convince to stand with you." That was the challenge Rodriguez had been dreading. The galactic species were impressed by the human victory, but they were also terrified by human methods. Convincing them to fight alongside Marines who carried nuclear weapons as standard equipment and considered suicide charges as valid tactical options would not be easy. The conversation was interrupted by an alarm from the command center sensors. Major Harrison looked up from her station with concern. "Sir, we've got incoming ships. Multiple contacts, various configurations. They're broadcasting identification codes from most of the major galactic powers." Rodriguez exchanged a glance with General Chen's hologram. "Looks like the neighbors are coming call." Within the hour, the orbital space around Kalos Prime filled with ships representing 12 different species. The Zephyrian Council delegation was led by Chancellor Vexai herself, but she wasn't alone. General Korvash of the Draconian Empire had brought a battle group of heavy cruisers. Commander Thalnox represented the hegemony with a squadron of their most advanced vessels. Even the normally peaceful Altarians had sent their defense fleet. The meeting took place in the ruins of Kalos Prime's planetary capital, in a hastily constructed chamber that could accommodate the various atmospheric requirements of the assembled species. Rodriguez stood at the center, still wearing his combat armor, while the alien representatives arranged themselves in a circle around him. "Colonel Rodriguez," Chancellor Vexai began, "we've come to discuss terms for a joint defense agreement. The Devourer fleet that's assembling, we estimate it's 10 times larger than anything they've sent before." "We're aware," Rodriguez replied simply. General Korvash leaned forward, his massive reptilian form dominating one section of the chamber. "Human, your species has proven its worth in battle, but even you cannot face such numbers alone. We need a unified command structure, coordinated strategies, shared intelligence." "Agreed," Rodriguez said, surprising several of the delegates. "But there are going to be conditions." Commander Thalnox of the hegemony bristled. "You're hardly in a position to make demands, human. We're offering to share our technology, our fleet's strength, and I'm offering to share the reason why we won," Rodriguez interrupted. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it that made several species' survival instincts activate. "Your fleets are impressive. Your technology is advanced. Your tactical databases are comprehensive, but none of that matters if you're not willing to do what needs to be done. He activated a holographic display showing the battle statistics from Kalos Prime. The Devourers lost because they expected you to fight like civilized beings. They expected energy weapons, long-range engagements, and withdrawal when faced with superior odds. We gave them kinetic weapons, knife-fighting ranges, and Marines who consider outnumbered to be a target-rich environment. Ambassador Theclon of the Veilthra shifted uncomfortably. Colonel, with respect, we cannot simply abandon millennia of civilized warfare doctrine. Our people would never accept. Then, your people are going to die, Rodriguez said bluntly. The Devourers have studied our tactics now. They know we use kinetic weapons, so they'll adapt their shields. They know we prefer close-range combat, so they'll develop countermeasures. The only advantage we have left is that we're willing to do things they can't predict because no rational being would attempt them. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Finally, it was General Corvash who spoke. What exactly are you proposing? Rodriguez smiled, and several delegates took involuntary steps backward. I'm proposing we teach them that humans aren't the only species capable of fighting dirty when survival is on the line. Over the next 3 weeks, Kalos Prime became the site of the most unusual military training program in galactic history. Human Marines worked alongside alien soldiers, teaching them tactics that violated every principle of civilized warfare. The results were mixed. The Draconians adapted quickly. Their warrior culture had many similarities to human military doctrine, and they took to close-quarters combat with enthusiasm. General Corvash himself insisted on participating in the training, much to his subordinates' horror. Your species fights with honor, he told Rodriguez after a particularly brutal hand-to-hand combat session. But you understand that sometimes honor means being willing to sacrifice everything for victory. The hegemony forces struggled more with the concept. Their military was built around technological superiority and precise coordination. The idea of improvisation and controlled chaos was alien to them. But their commander, Admiral Zuaxtar, was a pragmatist. My officers think you humans are insane, he admitted to Rodriguez during a strategy session. They may be right, but insanity seems to be what the situation requires. The real surprise came for the Altarians. The peaceful species had never developed a strong military tradition, but they possessed something that proved invaluable: absolute precision in everything they did. When human instructors taught them to use explosives, the Altarians approached demolitions with the same mathematical perfection they applied to their art. They're turning bomb-making into a science, Sergeant Santos reported after working with an Altarian engineering unit. I've never seen anyone calculate blast patterns with that level of accuracy. But it was the Zephyrians who provided the biggest surprise. Chancellor Vexhai approached Rodriguez privately 3 days before the Devourer fleet was scheduled to arrive. Colonel, I have a request that my government cannot officially sanction, she said. I want you to train me personally. Rodriguez studied the Chancellor's blue-scaled features. Ma'am, with respect, you're not a soldier. You're a politician. I'm a leader who has watched her people die while I made speeches and signed treaties, she replied. The Devourers are coming for my homeworld next. When they arrive, I intend to be standing on the front lines with a weapon in my hands. The training was brutal. Vexhai pushed herself through exercises that would have challenged veteran Marines, learning to use weapons she had never seen before, studying tactics that her species considered barbaric. But she endured it all, driven by a determination that reminded Rodriguez uncomfortably of his own Marines. When the Devourer fleet finally arrived, it was indeed massive. Long-range sensors counted over 3,000 ships, including new vessel types that appeared to be specifically designed to counter human tactics. The lead ship was a mobile fortress the size of Small Moon, bristling with weapons and protected by shields that could deflect the output of an entire star. Well, Rodriguez said as he watched the enemy fleet approach on his tactical displays, at least they're not underestimating us this time. The alien commanders gathered in the Joint Operations Center looked nervous. The combined galactic fleet numbered only 400 ships, and most of those were damaged survivors from previous battles. On paper, it wasn't even a contest. But Rodriguez had spent the past month teaching them that paper meant nothing in real combat. All fleet commanders, this is Devil Dog Actual, he announced over the combined communication channel. Remember what we've trained for. The enemy expects us to fight their kind of battle. Massive formations, long-range engagement, withdrawal when faced with superior numbers. Instead, we're going to give them the kind of fight that would make a human Marine proud. The battle began exactly as Rodriguez had planned. The combined fleet scattered into dozens of small units, each one following tactics that seemed suicidal by conventional standards. Draconian cruisers performed ramming attacks on ships 10 times their size. Altarian vessels, loaded with precisely calculated explosives, dove into enemy formations like guided missiles. Hegemony ships used their advanced sensors not for targeting, but for electronic warfare that turned the Devourer's own weapons against them. And, throughout it all, human Marines provided the kind of leadership that could only come from species that had never learned the meaning of the word impossible. Colonel Rodriguez watched from the command center as Chancellor Vex High led a boarding party against a Devourer cruiser. The Zephyrian politician-turned-warrior moved through the alien ship's corridors with the controlled violence of a trained killer, her scaled hand steady on a human assault rifle as she and her mixed-species team fought their way toward the enemy vessel's power core. "Ma'am," Rodriguez said over the comm, "remember what we practiced. Low and fast, overwhelming firepower, no mercy." "Understood, Colonel," came Vex High's reply. "And Colonel, thank you for teaching us how to fight like humans." The explosion that consumed the Devourer cruiser lit up the space around Kalos Prime like a second sun. It was followed by dozens of others, as the combined fleet proved that when survival was on the line, any species could learn to fight with the desperate ferocity that humans had perfected over millennia of warfare. When the battle finally ended 14 hours later, the Devourer fleet was in full retreat. They had come expecting to face the same civilized opponents they had been defeating for months. Instead, they found themselves fighting an enemy that had learned the most important lesson humanity had to offer. Sometimes, winning means being willing to become the thing your enemy fears most. As the surviving alien ships fled toward the edge of the galaxy, Rodriguez received a transmission from the Devourer fleet commander. The voice was mechanical, emotionless, but there was something in it that might have been respect. "Humans of Earth, you have taught this galaxy a new form of warfare. We acknowledge your effectiveness, but understand that this conflict is far from over. We will adapt, as we always have." Rodriguez smiled as he composed his reply. "To the Devourers, you're welcome to try. But remember, we've been at war with each other for thousands of years, and we're still here. You might be the biggest threat the galaxy has ever faced, but you're not the first species to underestimate humanity. Ask the others how that worked out for them." The transmission ended, leaving the command center in silence. Around him, alien officers from a dozen different species looked at Rodriguez with expressions ranging from awe to terror. They had won the battle, saved billions of lives, and proven that the galaxy could stand against the Devourer threat. But they had also learned something that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. When pushed to the edge of extinction, any species could learn to fight like humans. The question was whether the galaxy was ready for a universe where everyone fought with the controlled madness that had made humanity the most feared species in the cosmos. As reports of the victory spread throughout the galaxy, one thing became clear. The aliens had begged for salvation, and humanity had answered. But in saving the galaxy from the Devourers, the humans had also taught everyone else how to wage war with an intensity that would reshape civilization itself. The age of gentle, civilized warfare was over. The age of human-style, total war had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same.